Welcome to the Reb Chat Podcast. Our third series is about creative entrepreneurship. I'm Cathy, and I'm thrilled to have you on board. Join us as we uncover the fascinating journeys of entrepreneurial minds who have transformed their creative ideas into businesses, products, services, and works of art. Our guests are here to share their inspiring stories with you. In each episode, we'll explore the mindset, the skill set, and everything else it takes to make innovation happen. And whether you're an inspiring or aspiring entrepreneur, an experienced business owner, a creator of art or stories, or simply someone who enjoys hearing creative journeys, this podcast is made for you. Welcome to the Reb Chat, the podcast that talks about creativity and entrepreneurship and making innovation happen. And today I'm really delighted to welcome William Mikula into the RebChat studio to talk about his journey, because he is a hybrid. He is a multiple entrepreneur, and he's also a story maker, a voiceover actor. He's worked in film, TV, commercials, all sorts of things. Hello, William.
Hello, Cathy. Thank you for having me.
Could you just introduce yourself to the listeners, William? A little bit about you, where you come from, just a little bit of history.
Yeah, a bit of history on me. So I was born in upstate New York, and then my mother went to Pratt Institute, so we moved to Brooklyn. So went from upstate to in the city, and then after that, my father was actually recruited by an oil firm. So we went from New York to Saudi Arabia, which was an interesting transition, right? Snow to sand.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were over there for a bit. My father loved it. My mother hated it. And then when the Gulf War broke out, or was it with Desert Storm, we moved to Houston, which was the headquarters of the oil company. You know, my pops kind of maxed out at that company and wanted to explore other opportunities. So we went to New Orleans. And then ultimately, he wanted to try his hand. He had this entrepreneurial itch that kind of runs on his side of the family. It seems to skip every other generation at times, but it certainly hit him, and it certainly hit me. And so he, you know, his family used to be, you know, kind of the landowners and the business owners in a town called Casadega, New York, which is upstate, not far from Buffalo. He and my mom actually met at Geneseo college in upstate New York. And so he had, you know, this bug, this entrepreneurial bug, and he met a State Farm recruiter, and State Farm told him that there's this city called Atlanta that they felt was going to become the hub of the Southeast, and that they were looking for agents to move. So he had never seen Atlanta. We had never seen Atlanta, but, you know, took the leap of faith, put a shingle up here in Atlanta, and 30 years later, he's still cranking out of that business, same business. So I grew up, you know, in a very kind of entrepreneurial household. As he was building the insurance business, you know, insurance is great, right? Because you can, once you build the book of business, you have the residuals. It's fantastic, but building it's very difficult. You have to pound the pavement. You're in a very competitive industry. This was before really, you know, the internet was widespread too. So it was literally door to door. And I remember going on appointments with him as a little guy. I also remember he parked a lot of the money he had made overseas in oil with a broker up in New York, and that was not one of the good brokers. And so I have a vivid memory of around, you know, 9 or 10, our family losing it all those savings that were supposed to help carry us through until the insurance business really picked up. So I kind of had this experience, this vivid experience of going from, you know, we had a great lifestyle to we're broke. And so my mom and myself, we actually, you know, pretty much lived at the office with my father. My mom became his secretary. I became the paper shuffler, right? Back almost like a runner back and forth, shuffling these policies around for them and trying my best to organize them as a little guy. And you know, that's kind of the environment I grew up in. So I experienced, you know, having plenty. I experienced having very little, and kind of everything in between. And then the hustle that it takes to kind of bounce back from a shock like that of losing it all. And so I think those kind of seared a few things in me. I think I was naturally drawn to creative arts, and I was naturally drawn to making something from nothing, or taking different parts and putting a tapestry together. But I think having those memories too, as growing up kind of as the richest, or excuse me, the poorest family in a rich neighborhood, that puts a chip on your shoulder. It really does. It puts a chip on your shoulder to go out there because as a little guy you're like, well, why do they have somebody doing their grass, and why do they have somebody cleaning their house, and why do and you start asking those questions, and then you start learning why. And I think that really at a young age put a lot of hustle, instilled a lot of hustle in me.
So they say there's always a motivation and a drive, and sometimes it's excitement and sometimes it's pain. Seeing what your family went through,
Mhm.
seeing how your father coped with it, and as you say, seeded in you something. I want to do something and I want to succeed, but you can see what it took. And I know that you're a creative person and you're an actor. So how did you combine? We'll talk about the businesses in later on, but how did you combine this desire to make movies and stories? And we did a story together. So that's how we met. What came first, the business or the creativity?
Yeah, so it was really that I didn't want to be as much as I was always drawn to creative arts. I also again had that early memory of being and going broke, and how miserable that was. Not to mention miserable, but also I saw how much pressure and strain that put on my parents' relationship, which was a very difficult time, for them, for me, it's just for everybody. And so I knew I didn't want to be a starving artist, so uh knowing that my end goal was to create, I needed to find a means to get there, and didn't have a lot of connections, in the space for film and TV. That wasn't really what our background was, or I didn't really have any friends or families or inner circle in that world. And so when you don't have any connections, you have to create them, and so how do you create connections? Well, in my life, it's been about delivering more value than you ask for in return, and I think a lot of people maybe miss that message. It's kind of like, well, what do I get? What do I get? What do I get? What do I get? And so I started really business first. I mean, my first business ever was, cutting grass, right? I had a beat down lawnmower. My buddy across the street had a blower and a weed whacker, and we took, this pitiful looking three pieces of equipment, and we created a little landscape service, and then we put out a few flyers that were janky, and I would probably shudder if I saw them today. But they worked, and I think the people, in the neighborhood really respected, two of their own, right? Trying to not sit back and play video games all day, but really kind of get out there and hustle. And
How old were you, William, with your lawnmower business, with your grass cutting business?
so let's see, we were 14. We didn't have a driver's license. So we had to literally walk the equipment, I mean, down the street, door to door, with our gas cans and then the equipment. And we just had to walk. And so we couldn't take, anything outside the neighborhood because it was 2 years before we got our driver's licenses to where we could, finally expand the business. But, we learned so much. My dad was still really busy rebuilding his business. He didn't really have time to kind of chime in. And so, we learned, me and my partner learned from the School of Hard Knocks, which is, quite the unforgiving teacher. But, those battle scars learned at a young age, I mean, I still apply some of the things I learned at 14, now all these decades later, but that was the beginning of the journey. And that was my first taste of adding value to others, like giving them value and then getting something in return. And then with that return, I could do whatever I wanted. I could go to the gas station and buy candy, if I wanted. I could go to the movies. I could, and so I started to get this taste. I knew I wanted freedom, and I knew I wanted money to not be this great strain or disruptor in my life. I wanted it to give me options and freedom. Um, and I wanted to be able to move out of my house, and my parents' house, because like I said, it was not a fun place to be around at that time. And so I just craved this freedom. And once I got a taste of it, I really never looked back.
So from the age of 14, as you say, hustling with your friend, probably doing a great service with minimal resources, but you just went out and made it happen. And you said the School of Hard Knocks and lessons that learned. So thinking of you now as a father of two beautiful boys, I know you've just got a newborn, haven't you? Little Hudson.
Yeah, little Hudson.
And you've got Ben, haven't you, who's 6.
Yeah, Benjamin.
So as a father, and we'll talk about your latest product, those lessons when you were little, well, teenager. What were they? What are the things that stayed with you?
Yeah, so I think it's a few things. I would say you can never overestimate the value of good communication. So I really learned that young the value of good communication. And so that means um, and every part, you know, every interaction has some kind of, even if people don't realize it, there's some kind of salesmanship going on, right? You're either trying to charm or convince or cooperate. There's some kind of sales at play. And when I realized the value of clear, consistent communication with our, small but mighty and growing group of landscape customers, my partner wasn't really big on that. He kind of just thought, look, the customers will assume X and then we'll do Y. But I learned that often when we left it to assumptions, it did not lead to desirable results. So I learned the value of clear, consistent, persuasive communication, but also tactful, right? Like we didn't want to come across as overselling. I mean, we couldn't afford to come across as bombastic because we had no clue what we were doing. When somebody would say, "Hey, can you plant 7 azaleas and build us a retaining wall," we'd say yes, of course, because we needed the money, but we had no clue how to do it. So we'd have to go to the local library and research, old school computers, right? And books. I mean, because the computers wouldn't tell us everything we needed. We didn't have Google. So we'd have to go to these books and figure out how to plant azaleas, how to build a retaining wall.
You had the demand. They wanted that. You didn't know how to do it, but you said, we'll do it anyway. We'll go and find out, which is an incredible skill because they call it, what is it? You're flying the plane and you're still building it while it's in the air. uh,
I like that.
which I think a lot of modern businesses need to do. Do you think it's also about taking that risk and having that confidence it's going to work out? Do you think there's something about that as well?
I think you have to take calculated risk. I mean, like we had a threshold, right? So we said, okay, if somebody asks us to cut down, trees, that's something that we have zero experience and we don't want to take on that kind of risk or liability. And so when people would ask us for that, this is where I learned how to create referral networks. So, well, we don't do it. Then I went to my friend who knew a guy who knew a guy who did specialize. He had a company that specialized in tree trimming and cutting. And so next thing you know, we're referring business to them and they're giving us a little piece. And that's where I learned, oh, there's value in having this kind of ecosystem around you of trusted people that you can refer business back and forth with. So like we had a certain threshold of risk we were willing to take. We figured as long as the retaining wall wasn't kind of a safety issue, even if we had to fix it, we could go back and fix it. Or worst case, we'd pay out of pocket to have somebody come in and fix it for us if it went that far. Planting, we could always dig up and replant the plants. But I think it was like we kind of zeroed in consciously and unconsciously on the risk we were willing to take, but you have to be willing to take some kind of risk. Like if we sat there and we said, no, 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 the customers are going to find somebody else that can meet that need. And then next, in our world, what that meant was somebody there doing pine straw, mulch, building retaining walls. They're going to then say, well, why don't you let us maintain your lawn every week or every 2 weeks? And then all of a sudden we're cut out of the picture. So it's like, you have to be willing to take calculated risk for sure. But it is important to come up with what that threshold is. Are you willing to roll the dice all in on every hand? Or, my preferred approach is taking consistent calculated risk.
That is something you still do in your businesses?
Very much so. Consistent calculated risk, clear communication of what that risk is, right? Hey guys, here's the upside. Here's, rosy picture. Here's the downside, right? If everything goes wrong. And then here's the likely outcome, which is typically a combination of the two.
Of course. So what I've got so far is this communication, which is laced with persuasive and tact and charm. And also, I would say playing it forward. That's the one thing I really heard in this conversation, that you're not just giving to get, you're playing it forward.
I was just going to interject that I'm just huge on giving more value than you ask for in return. I mean, that's how I've been able to build these relationships that have lasted. I mean, I have relationships that, still our group of friends I've been best friends with since kindergarten, right? And, past clients that I'm still friends with to this day. And that's just why I'm big on, developing, nurturing a relationship. And the only way to do that is through communication,
And honesty, and it's something else you said is like, well, we can't really do that. We'll try and do it, but if it's too much for us, we can outsource it.
Mhm.
So I think within that communication, although you might win the deal or win the project, can you deliver?
Mhm.
You can deliver through your partnerships. Yes, you can. So then you go into the research, the referral network, the willingness to take risk. I think that's absolutely essential. And also looking for all more opportunities. That's something else, where you saw all the sub businesses from the main businesses, here's the main hustle, and there's these little side hustles emerging because there was a need there. So, wow, you went to the entrepreneurship school without being a school. Somebody asked me, where's the school? I went, I think it's there are schools, but I think it's as you say, it's a school of hard knocks. So how long did that run for, William?
That ran from 14 until 18. Over those 4 years, we built up a nice business. I mean, I also learned the value of keeping good business records, right? Because at the time we had spiral notebooks and, big pens. That's all we had. We didn't have Excel or anything like that. But then it came time to pay taxes, and we're like, what are taxes? So then we learned after that first year, we learned the value of keeping good books, and keeping good business records, right? Keeping things organized. You don't have to be overkill, in my opinion. I know there's, certain entrepreneurs that probably or would be entrepreneurs that have perfect desks. Like literally, there's not clutter anywhere, but yet they didn't make a single sale for the day or get a single new audience member or a single new reader or a single, the things that actually move the needle, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested you say that because I was listening to a YouTube about productivity, and he said something very similar. He said, if you want to be productive, you need to get on with the job, stop over planning, stop looking for that shiny new, especially in this digital age where there's so many apps. Because it might give you an incremental gain, but actually it's stopping you doing the work. And I'm actually picking up that even though you had a system, it wasn't, as you say, spiral notebooks and pens, and maybe you do it in a much more sophisticated way, but it's actually action oriented as a bias as well. Would you say that's been your experience?
I mean, totally. I interviewed with a potential team member, and then they went off and started their own thing, and they were so proud of what they had set up, so they asked me to look at it with them. And so I did, and they walked me through how they had the whole system organized, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was 5 different productivity apps. It was everything, sunk with each other. That everything was cross-platform and collateral. I mean, it was all these big fancy MBA terms. And so I was like, well, how many hours a day does it take you just to keep up with your productivity apps? Right. And she was like, well, it takes me about 5 to 6. So I said, that's 5 to 6 hours. I mean, so I was like, if that's an 8-hour day, let's just say 5 to 6 hours are consumed by productivity apps. What does that leave you to actually build your business? Go to a business lunch or meet with a potential client or send out, emails to your lead list or find a lead list, right? Like you're so organized, but you're generating $0 in revenue.
Do you think that's about comfort zones or unwilling to risk or getting things messy? Is there a combo there?
I think, a lot of times what maybe would-be entrepreneurs underestimate is at the end of the day, something has to be sold. Either you or a voice actor, your voice, a widget or a service it doesn't matter if you're doing landscaping, if you're doing hair, if you're doing software as a service, if you have an incredible app you've developed, if you have a wonderful podcast like this.
Thank you.
I mean, at the end of the day, if the audience is 0 and the sales are 0, you could have the best content, and that was always my fear as a little guy. I was like, if I write the best screenplay or if I write the best book or I write America's next great novel, right? Whatever. If I don't have the means to put that
Mm.
into some kind of distribution channel, then what's the point? Essentially, I'm just doing it as a vanity project for myself versus a business. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Like, I think a lot of times people feel this pressure to take a passion and turn it into a side hustle or business or whatever. But if you're intimate, I think for that person I was just mentioning, her biggest fear, I think, in my opinion, reading between the lines, was getting on the phone and talking about her business and asking that other person on the other line for their business,
Mm.
right? Which would then generate revenue. I think the sales process is probably the most misunderstood component of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Because I think a lot of people think I create a cool widget or a cool app or a cool art piece or a cool screenplay, and the rest will just fall into place. And they just really discount how challenging mentally, physically, psychologically, the sales process can be if you let it, right? If you let it. The worst anybody can ever say no to you is no. That's the worst they can ever say. But somehow our human psyche really does psych us out when it comes to the sales.
Is that about rejection, do you think?
I think so. I think so. I think
Mm.
as humans, we're conditioned to fear and avoid rejection, right? Probably goes back to our tribal roots, right? Where being rejected from the tribe meant death, right? Because if you're the one guy out in the jungle and you're not a part of the tribe, you're probably not going to last that long, right? And so I think it's deeply rooted in our consciousness, which is why not everyone is an entrepreneur. Not everyone is sales cut out for sales. And I don't mean anything wrong by that, because that could be somebody that goes on to maybe cure cancer or something, right?
Yeah.
It's just, uh, I think the natural human instinct is to want to avoid rejection. And when you're building an entrepreneurial enterprise, you have to be fearless when it comes to rejection. You just can't let it bother.
That there's something about what I call making it happen almost all the time. And in the phases of innovation where you're creating the product, you're doing the beta tests, and we'll talk about your latest product. I'm sure you've done a few more than Lana the Tequila, that you launched. I think it was last year, wasn't it, Lana? Is it last year? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So 3 years of R&D and then commercially last year. Yep.
So there's a process of, oh, this feels great. This is all shiny and new, and there's a lot of excitement, but that can wear out. That type of excitement energy can wear out very quickly, can't it? And then you get into the doubt of, does anybody want this? We're spending a lot of money on creating and developing it. Is it going to work? So there's a lot of uncertainty. So you need something to keep you going. So for you, William, in that space where and I'd like to talk to you about Lana and how it all came about, but what is it you do to keep yourself going? Because I think there is this almost like a marathon runner. It's a long game here, isn't it? The entrepreneurial journey. What do you do to keep yourself going?
Yes, it is. And it's important not to burn out, because then your babies will never come to fruition. But I think, I have a good story, a good example of, a failure that ended up turning into a success, thankfully. But like, along that journey, there were so many opportunities to quit, So I created, while I was in college, I had this challenge, we weren't supposed to have dogs on site, but me and my wife now, we end up at a mall, and then you end up at a little pet store. And next thing you know, I have a little pug, right? I don't know what to do with a pug. Never had a dog before, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. So smuggle the dog, her name was Bella, into the townhouse on college, on the campus, and try to, keep her hidden. But of course, word gets out, but me and the management company came to an agreement, and I don't know that Bella upheld her side of that, but she took out windowsills all throughout the townhouse. But we got them all fixed, and we left us, when we took off, we left as friends. But what I found was, it was a challenge to give her the walks that she needed every single day and juggle, business and juggle studying and juggle all these things. And so I went to the store to buy a leash that I could just attach to my belt loop. And I couldn't find one, and I searched everywhere, couldn't find one. So I went to Home Depot, I built a prototype, and I used it. And then everybody, as I'm walking around the development, would say, "Wait, where'd you get that? I need a leash just like that, because I need two hands, but I can't ever have two hands because one is occupied by this leash. Even when I'm inside my townhouse trying to do things in the house, but I want to train my dog and keep him by my side, but I can't seem to find a way to do that." So I was like, okay, here's a problem, here's a pain point. I have a solution for it. And, let me turn this into a business, right? Like I was young, naive, ready to take on the world. So I found a guy who was a consultant who specialized in overseas production. Reached out to him, told him my idea. He plugged me in with a factory that he liked to work with over in China. So I mean, I'm in college. I'm really learning how to build a product, right? Like I was going to classes to learn how to do it, but then like on the side, I was actually doing it. And long story short, got the mold, put in for the patent, did all this stuff, but I'm still a college student, so I don't have an endless, bankroll at that point. So I'm like, I need to generate sales to be able to, keep this thing moving. And then was also a good lesson for me because the consultant ended up not really working out that great. He was on a cushy kind of monthly retainer and it wasn't results based. So I'd say another lesson I learned when you're dealing with vendors is make it very much results based to the extent that you can, especially if it's a newer relationship, because it's important to make sure that those that you're relying on are delivering to help
Mm.
move the needle, in the business. And so I ultimately had to part ways with him. And I took the relationship over directly, but I didn't speak Chinese, so I'm using, and this is before Google Translate. So I'm having to learn, Mandarin to talk to the factory
No way.
broken English. I mean, it's this crazy thing. And they sent over the first batch of product, which of course was wrong. So I had to go back and get a second, third batch in. So then finally we got it right. And I said, okay, I have this great invention. I'm going to be a millionaire. This is how we do it, right? And then I realized the important piece for distribution. Like if you have this wonderful product, but you have no way to distribute it, what are you going to do? And so then I went door to door to like the different uh, pet stores in our college town. They all, of course, said yes. But I mean, that was like 3 or 4 stores. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make it to a millionaire status, selling to 4 or 5 dog stores. So how do I scale this? So then I had to start learning about scaling, right? How do you scale? And it was just incredibly difficult. That industry is owned and dominated by a lot of big incumbent companies that don't want to share their turf. So when you go to all these retailers, they're like, well, why would we just buy one product from you? We want to buy 10, 20, 30 SKUs at a time. So I'm like, what's a SKU? And they tell me. So I'm learning, wow, as a solopreneur here with one product, this ain't gonna work. I need some kind of distribution. And so rolled the dice. I came up to that threshold where I'd put so much money and I was like, okay, no more after this. And what that roll of the dice was going to Las Vegas and doing a trade show. And this was our first ever trade show. Never been to a trade show in my life. And so I bought the booth space, showed up. I convinced a couple of my buddies to come with me. It wasn't too hard to say, hey guys, I'll cover your trip to Vegas. Just, come with me and bring a Hipley shirt and a belt and you'll be good. Actually, one of them got his belt, so but that's a story for another day. So we go and I'm so naive. We pull into the center at the Mandalay Bay and we go to our booth and we're expecting the booth to be all set up, hip leash, table, whole nine, and it's just literally a concrete slab, you know. And I go to the organizer and I say, "Hey, where's our hip leash booth?" And they say, "Oh, you're looking at it." And they're like, and I said, "Well, where's the table? Where's the anything?" And they're like, "Well, you have to provide all of that." So we didn't even know that because we were so new. And so we rushed out. When we landed, the enterprise rental car people talked us into upgrading to a convertible because we thought we'd be really cool as 3 guys in a convertible on the Vegas Strip. Well, then we realized how are we going to fit uh, half of Target Homes Goods store, right, the aisle into a convertible to then bring here. So we had to stuff everything we could find, stools, tables, tablecloths, and then we had one of our guys just lay on top of it in the back of the convertible so it wouldn't fly out. And we came back to Mandalay Bay, set it up, and I'm looking pretty pessimistic at this point, right? Like nothing had been working leading up to this. It just seemed like a black hole, money pit, good money after bad. The convention starts. We finally get our act together. We bought these mechanical dogs, Chi Chi and Lulu. I'll never forget their names, from Target. We put batteries in them. They started yipping and yapping and jumping around our little booth area, which now looked a whole lot better, thankfully. And of the like probably 2 or 3 hours in, this younger gal came up to the booth, started laughing at our Chi Chi and Lulu, our little mechanical dogs, and started talking to us about the story and the brand. She said, "Well, this is an incredible product. We've never seen anything like it." Da da da. She tried it out on herself. She'd like after a while, she's like, "I'd like to place an order," and I was like, "Yes, finally." And we gave her the order book. She wrote it in and she, said thank you for our time and walked away. I opened up the order book after she left because you never want to sound too desperate, right? As an entrepreneur, you want it to sound like that was your millionth sale, not your first. And I looked at the order book and it ended up being Amazon, you know. And and the hip leash turned around from that point on. But, had I given up before then, right, or not rolled the dice or not put myself out there in an environment I had never been a part of, in a trade show, that opportunity would have never presented itself. So I just like telling that story because it's got all the things, right? Failure, upside, patents, IP, logistics, languages. I mean, success, failure, highs, lows. And that was the story of my first invention, right? That I commercialized, which is called the hip leash.
Is it still available, the hip leash?
It is.
When we do the show notes, we'll put that into the link. Here you are as a teenager with your business. You go to college. Really, it was a necessity that came up with this idea, and then you decided to develop it into a full product and all the things you learned.
Yeah, and I would just say too, like there's a fork in the road, so if everybody's very good at, very handy and very good at creating little solutions. There would have been nothing wrong with me creating that prototype for me and my friends and calling it a day. It's just, as you know, Cathy, like when your instinct as an entrepreneur, there's no way to turn off that switch. Like even if you try to tell yourself, hey, let me just keep this low key, small, let me not turn it into something, more you'll find kind of the natural entrepreneurs, like they just can't help themselves. Like there was no way I was just going to be able to do 5 prototypes. Like I had to at least try to turn it into a business. So, but there's also nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this is neat. It's a neat contraption for me and my inner circle here, and that's good. That's fine. So I always like to say that too. Like, there's nothing wrong with creating a great widget and then just not going through the heartache that's going to follow if you turn it into a business. On the other hand, if you can't see it through and you do have the fortitude to see it through, the rewards can be great. So I developed a few more pet products along that line. This was in the college years, and then, I was dealing with logistics and dealing with marketing and advertising on the internet. So I was an early adopter of things like AdWords, AdSense, search engine optimization, affiliate marketing, all of that. And so coming out of college, I helped businesses come online, because most businesses at that time, circa 2004 to 2009, were still learning what and how to interact online, how to take payments online, how to protect themselves online. Um, so I got into that and domain names. In fact, domain names are what taught me royalties, right? So I bought a bunch of domain names, and to this day, I get, paid royalties for the use of those domain names. So that kind of was one of my first taste of, wow, do it once and then reap the reward, for months and years to come. So all of those lessons were great. It was the early days, Wild Wild West. And then again, just building on building my Rolodex, building my skill set, learning things. I mean, at that point too, I was young and naive. I think some of the cautionary tales are, really be careful as money does start coming in, really be careful with who's around you and what that inner circle looks like and who you trust and who you kind of let in to that circle, because you'll find it's hard enough to make it, but once you do start making it, not everybody has your best intention in mind. So another, I think, entrepreneur 101 type thing is really, really, really keep your inner circle tight. And especially as the business starts to do well. That's why you see a lot of people bring with them their, even when they make it big, right? Professional athletes, et cetera, they bring who they know from their childhood along for the ride with them, right? And it's not that they're MBAs but it's just that they trust them. I've been disappointed, a handful of times with, people's intentions that are hard to kind of suss out when you're new and you're young and you're excited and your business is starting to do well.
Definitely. And so there you have the leash business. What did you develop after that?
So after that, really it was focusing on small, medium-sized businesses, getting them online, getting them plugged into, the World Wide Web, and then eventually And then eventually that led to, as I started making good money, I really started plugging that into creative pursuits, and then so I was like, okay, I'm not going to be a starving artist anymore. Let me take a chunk of the revenue and put it towards my creative efforts, right? And eventually that led to a publishing gig, and then I became one of the featured. I was started off actually as a ghostwriter, then I became one of the featured writers. And then I learned how to turn content into capitalism, right? So content into capital. So what does that mean? It means, putting a product together that people are willing to pay money for in the days of the internet where if you want it, you can get it for free, but I think I was of the school of thought that if you create and you add that value, right? If you add more value and you create more value than what you're asking for in return, people will say yes to that transaction. So I applied what I've been doing since I was 14, but I did it, on the web and in written format. And then that opened up a bunch of doors, but it was a lot. I mean, my schedule at that point was, juggling a few different businesses, a new, marriage, and juggling a relationship. And so it was just, I was approaching burnout, and I hit burnout, and I was losing my love of the creative process. Now, granted, it was very much nonfiction heavy. It was very, it was all businesses. It wasn't my entrepreneurial, I think, or my creative side of my brain was desperate for nurture, right? And so I took a little pause, which I think is important. There comes a point where you need to take a pause, otherwise you'll, bang your head through the drywall. And I went to an Atlanta film festival here, in Atlanta, and at the time it was interesting. My timing was interesting because Atlanta was becoming this mecca for the film industry. And I went to this. I knew no one. I had zero agenda. And I'm there, and I end up meeting the location scouts for a show called Ozark, which is a great show that I'd watched, and they filmed it here north of Atlanta, about 20 minutes from my house. And then at the cocktail party, I just started asking questions, kind of introducing myself again. No agenda, just being friendly and being open-minded. And eventually, they introduced me to a guy named Jack Bauer, who sounds like a character in his own right. And Jack had been struggling to finish this comedy, and he tells me the premise. And ironically, I had some experience kind of with the premise of his show, but in real life. And we met for coffee the next day, and he said, "Do you want to come on and help me write this?" And this goes back again to the lessons I learned at 14. I didn't know, I didn't have a clue of how to write a comedy screenplay. But you know what I said? I said, yes, of course. Because I figured I'd learn the details afterwards, and just figure it out. So we signed a deal, and we wrote the show called Active Adult. And it was a blast. Again, never written comedy, but what ended up happening in writing that show, it reignited my passion for writing, which had been just completely battered, and again, I was burned out leading up to that. So r writing a comedy with a guy I had met at a random, cocktail party after a film school or film festival in Atlanta.
So we're there in Atlanta, and you're writing again, and I'm hearing that some of the things that you learned from way back, which is play it forward, jump in with both feet. Don't worry that you don't know everything. You won't know everything. So there's almost like this unknown, which there is in the writing process. You don't know. You might have your structure, but you don't know where it's going to go. And you allowed yourself to do that.
And you'll never have all the information, no matter what you're doing, right? Like the gal I was telling you about who had everything organized, right? But like was almost like, let me get one more productivity app, or let me go to one more seminar, or let me read one more self-help book. But the problem is that always leads to one more, or it leads to inertia, or it's another month that you haven't worked on that business that you promised yourself you would roll out, right? Just again, I think that just one more philosophy is very dangerous. Because you're never going to have a complete set of information ever, ever, ever. And if you wait to act on it, it's always too late.
And I think that the people I've noticed who just jump in, I'll figure it out, but they've got that focus and that drive, and also the resilience and the staying power to finish it until the end, until it's in a good place. Or, and you mentioned this previously, to know when to stop digging, this is not going to work out. I
Yeah.
need to cut my losses here. This is the wrong project. I'm with the wrong people, whatever it is, because in the journey
Right.
there are failures, and knowing how to handle failure, I think is actually an important part of that journey. Knowing how to do that.
I think it is too. Like when I was playing ball growing up in high school, we had this saying called finish the drill, right? Finish the drill. And what that meant was if you're going to do it at your best, right? Nothing less than your best. And but then also too, be cognizant, right? If you're doing this and your body's not responding the way it should be responding, you don't want that to lead to permanent injury, which will then keep you out of every game in the future, right? And I think there's definitely parallels to that, the sports world and the business world, right? Finishing the drill, unless finishing but when you're in the drill, you have to be cognizant and aware, right? If you mortgage the house and then you put it in the business and then you mortgage your cars and you go to Vegas to put it all on black to try to pay off the mortgage of your house, that's, could lead to a divorce, right? And nothing's more costly than a divorce, so next thing you know, you're putting bad money, good money after bad after bad after bad, and you're compounding that. And then, that could lead to a debilitating loss where you can never get back in the game. So, I think finishing the drill is always something that I've kept with me since my ball playing days.
It's a great um, saying, finish the drill, which is, it's a focus, isn't it? It's like, give it your best and do it well and finish it.
Finish it.
The concept of Lana, which I know you're very proud of, it's won many awards. So could you tell our audience a little about Lana? It sounds like a woman, but I know it's a tequila, a delicious tequila. Haven't drunk it, by the way. I'm waiting till we meet. Uh, Tell me about the journey to Lana. I don't know if there's anything else, but if we can just go to where you've been sending all these wonderful pictures and you've got an award here, an award there. It looks like a blast, but I'm not sure if that is the case.
Yes, Lana's a wonderful nightcap. It's to bring the conversation full circle. So Lana, yeah, it was a culmination of everything I had learned leading up to that point. I mean, it's one of those unexpected businesses that, as an entrepreneur, you'll kind of find yourself in. Like once you start to see success in the entrepreneurial world, doors will open. So for an example, once I wrote, that comedy, Active Adult, I didn't know what would come of it, but all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm writing adventure and I'm in a horror movie, and I'm writing a historical epic, and then I'm doing these amazing audio shows with you, at RebCat, and it's like I would have never gone into that pathway had I not kind of got out of my comfort zone and showed up at an Atlanta Film Festival knowing no one, and then saying yes to writing a comedy when I had no idea how to write a comedy, right? Just trusting in the fact that you'll find a way. And so Lana had a lot of similarities to that. It kind of came about in a roundabout way. The original intention was, for me to
Mm.
more be a connector, right, of two different parties, and it was a totally different space, and it was within the spirits industry, but it wasn't tequila. And then all of a sudden, things started progressing, and my partners and co-founders and I really took a look at the tequila space, and kind of the insights there were that the what was available in America and in Europe and in Asia and kind of globally was, kind of this commercialized version of tequila, but it wasn't the pure form of tequila as tequila was meant to be. And so that put us on this odyssey, this 3-year odyssey of trying to create the perfect tequila. And again, yes, that's a huge topic. Probably we need our own show just for that, that odyssey. But we ultimately found a kindred spirit down in Mexico who thought the way we thought with how, if you ever go to Mexico, people will walk around in Mexico sipping on tequila just from these little cups, kind of all day long. It's almost like to an extent, their version of how we take coffee here. We walk around, you see Starbucks in every hand, right? Every other hand, you see a coffee cup. Down there, people are throughout their day kind of sipping, on tequila. And then when I tried it, it tasted amazing. I was like, wait, I've never had this type of tequila in the US. And they just kind of laughed. And they're like, what you have in the US isn't real tequila, in their opinion. And so we found this huge disconnect between what tequila should be, according to those that know it best, and what tequila was, presently on the market in the US. And then, we went to work just addressing that gap. And it was hard and it was long and many sleepless nights. And, lived on a plane, train, and automobile for probably, 2 years. But the end result was our first, we call it expression, which was Lana Blanco. Lana Blanco won the double gold and best in class at the San Francisco Spirits Award, which is kind of like the Grammys, right, of our world, spirits world. I won that last year. Reposado won double gold this year, which was our second expression. That's kind of the darker of the two liquids. And really what we did, kind of a big part of that success was we just homed in on how that process was meant to be, and we went back to basics. And then of course we added a few little secret sauce to it, and but it was not easy. I mean, we went through batch after batch after batch after batch, and it would have again been very easy to just give up. Not only that, but we were not celebrities, right? So we're coming into a space that's full of celebrities pushing X, Y, and Z brand.
George Clooney, I think he does coffee and tequila, doesn't he? I think does he?
He does, yeah. He's got his tequila, and so I think again, timing sometimes with entrepreneurship, you just have to hit the timing right. Sometimes and that's something, sometimes you're lucky, right? I think Lana, as she is today, maybe 20 years ago, the market might not have been ready for, right? A group of guys that aren't celebrities, a very premium tequila. Think about back to your college days, tequila at that time was coming out of these plastic bottles. There may have been a worm in it. It was, the market wasn't ready for Alana at that point. And then you had your wave, the second wave, that was the first. Second wave was these, kind of celebrity back products, which were better, but they still had a lot of additives in them, and then very marketing heavy. And our thesis was America was ready for the third wave. And our theory on that third wave was, the world is ready for a well-packaged product that also has a great liquid inside. So we always say Lana's not just a pretty bottle. Like, Lana is actually, an award-winning liquid. And what we set out to do is create a combination. You see a lot of brands out there have fantastic bottles, and then you try the liquid and it's awful. Well, then you go to Mexico and they have these great liquids, but you're literally drinking them out of a pewter cup, because that's all they have. And so we wanted to bridge those gaps, create a beautiful vessel, and combine that with an award-winning liquid. And our theory was the world was ready for that type of tequila.
I love that. And I saw some of the publicity and the adverts you shot, and I saw that must be marble and granite you're using for the bottle top. Is that right?
It was. We were at a meeting in Las Vegas, actually, and we could not figure out how to do the caps. And we kind of were lamenting this. And one of the guys there was from Monterrey. And he said, why don't you go to the marble mines in Monterrey and just pull marble from there to create the caps? Because we wanted something unique. Um, and when he brought that to us, we're like, wait a minute. If we cut these the right way, that will mean every single Lana cap is different, which means we'll be one of the few brands out there where every time you buy Lana or interact with Lana, it's slightly unique in some way, because it's never going to be the same bottle twice,
I
with the way
love
that we've
that.
designed
Yeah.
it. So, we also wanted it to be functional. So the caps are marble, they're precious gemstones. Our first marketing campaign was called Dialogue with a Gemstone, which was co-founder Maximilian Arson. That was his brainchild, and it's really, really gone well. We're gearing up for our second marketing campaign. We are still kind of young to market, but we found what's super cool about this is this ability for people to take these caps and these bottles and do incredible things. Paint the bottles. We left it kind of minimalistic, by design, right? So that way people can appreciate the clean presentation, but then also um, we want Lana to inspire people, right? And whatever that takes them. And so we've seen incredible things with the bottles, flower vases come from the bottles, beautiful paintings on the bottles. We've seen the caps turned into candles, into different designs, and towers and whatnot. Also used as ice cubes that don't melt, right? Because you could put it in the freezer and then use it as your single cube for a tequila drink or a whiskey drink. We've seen incredible cocktails created from the Lana liquid. And then two, a lot of people, I don't know if you've ever had this problem, but when you're hosting a party and you're pouring drinks for people, nobody really ever knows how to measure things out. And so we made the inner part of the
Mm,
cap right around 1.5 ounces. And so essentially it's a single. And if somebody wants a double, you just pour two capfuls. So
that's very clever. Yeah.
we're always trying to be, beautiful, yet also very functional at the same time. And I think that's what kind of sets us apart.
But I think there's two things, William, is that it's the repurposing of something beautiful in a throwaway culture where we need to think differently. And I think about plastic and all products where we think you've got a beautiful bottle here with a unique, as you say, marble. Is it granite as well, or is it just marble?
Yep, we could do marble, granite. We have some other surprises. You'll see.
Using it again is beautiful. And also the tequila itself, without all those additives, it must be much better for you. If you're going to drink alcohol, at least have a very good premium alcohol. And you mentioned to me when we were discussing this that it has health benefits.
Yeah, I think when, our goal was to make something that, we kind of laughingly, half jokingly say this, but like the part of Mexico where we distill, used to be the Aztec Empire, and so we kind of joke around that we'd want like an Aztec to wake up and try Lana and recognize it, right? Because it's just so pure to the plant. The name Lana. So if you go to Mexico and you see the big healthy agave, not the little tiny scrawny agave, but the big healthy agave, they call that the botanical name for that is Tiquilana. And so our name Lana is paying respect to the heritage of tequila, which is the tequilana plant. And so, yeah, I mean, the deep, rich history of this liquid, right? Weddings, before battle, funerals, um, all sorts of major life moments were marked by tequila. And it wasn't just something you shoot with salt on the rim at 2 a.m., right? After you've already been drinking, right? It was meant to be something higher and better, almost like a great wine or a great whiskey or a great bourbon. The idea was create something that is true to the roots, which is it should be good enough to sip. It shouldn't need buckets of lime or salt and lime, and it should be something that you can enjoy with friends and family. Um, and again, not just at 2 a.m. when you've already been drinking all day, right? And so we really wanted to bring the liquid back to its roots, which have incredible uses, and we've seen a great response, for young professionals. Of course, my colleagues in film and TV, that you and I interact with, athletes, people that still want to be able to enjoy themselves, but not pay the price of a brutal hangover the next day. Which unfortunately happens with additives.
Yeah, exactly. I think the movement of awareness is really growing now. It seems the world is really opening up to not throwing everything away and actually getting, and we go back to value. There's something you started at the beginning of this podcast. You're offering something, obviously a premium price as well as I'm sure, but it's a premium product. It's not a pretend premium product wrapped in a pretty bandage, but it's, cheap stuff inside. It's the best stuff inside. So that's amazing. And how are sales going?
I think that's it's pride and ownership. If you're gonna put your name on something, take pride in it, whether it's a podcast or how you act, your role that you play in a play or a film, or if it's a product you create. Really, take pride and take pride in ownership and pride in craftsmanship. Because it's important. Your name and reputation's on the line with every product you create. And so yeah, Lana's doing great. We're in like I believe at the time of this recording, 18 states and counting. We're in Germany, so we've made our foray into Europe, which is even more desperate for, I think, a high quality additive-free tequila, than the US, which is hard to believe, but we've had an incredible reception there. Our goal is to continue to roll out our anejo later this year. So then we'll have the core three, the Blanco, the Reposado, and the Anejo. And proving the doubters wrong. So many people did tell us, right? And that's another thing I guess I'd end with is you cannot let the doubt creep into your mind, because as soon as you let that demon in, he does not leave. And so many people thought we were insane, right? A group of guys that weren't celebrities going into one of the most competitive industries in the world, uh, with no connections, right, at the time. So again, it goes back to full circle. I had an understanding of how to just pound the pavement, right? That's what I grew up. That's what I learned, at 10 years old, at my pop's side, right? While he was building his business. And so, if you don't have any connections, right? When we moved to Atlanta when I was, young, we didn't know anyone, and so everything had to be created from scratch. And just applying that, in the spirits business has been super challenging, but fun and ultimately rewarding. And, we couldn't be more thrilled to have people really enjoying tequila now in a way that we feel it should have been enjoyed all along.
It's an amazing story, but I can see how it's built from the young you and how you've taken something from your character and personality. I think you're a very sociable person. That's the first thing I thought it's so easy to get along with, but you're using your innate talents and also developing some skills to make this work. And there are times that maybe some projects don't work, but you carry on and you pivot, I suppose, in those moments. So I wanted to ask you if you, what would you think is your superpower?
I think the superpower would be having an optimistic viewpoint by default, right? So, I always like to say that the world has a tendency not to end, so like I spend a lot of time, maybe talking to the team or colleagues or partners or whomever and co-founders and um of different businesses. And essentially when somebody comes in and they're pessimistic and they're downbeat and they think the war's already been lost, it's like I think my superpower is being able to redirect that conversation and redirect that viewpoint, to kind of an optimistic, right? Okay, if that was a failure, what did we learn from that failure, right? Or if we lost X, Y, and Z, what did we gain? If sometimes that's nothing. Sometimes that's just the battle scars and the tuition charges, right? Of getting through that. But I think it's this, no matter what's been thrown at me, throughout my life and the things that have happened, just having this default optimistic viewpoint, has kept me getting up from the mat, because you are going to get knocked down. You are going to hit the mat. You're going to feel like you took a knockout blow. And it's very easy at that point to just throw in the towel, but picking yourself off the mat, dusting off, and then getting back in the ring, with an optimistic viewpoint, right? Like, I just got a tooth punched out, but hey, I have 24 more, like it's, yeah, just having this view that the sun's going to rise the next day, um, and if it doesn't, then it won't matter anyway. But the world has a tendency not to end, and it just has paid to look at things optimistically versus pessimistically, especially if you want to be in the entrepreneurial world, because if you take a pessimistic outlook, you will find a million and one reasons not to cross the street, right? And if you never cross the street, you'll never succeed.
And maybe we can extend that, William, also to the artistic and the creative world as well, because the world is littered with books that have been written but not discovered somewhere, people who are pretty brilliant at what they do, but they didn't write another one. I don't know why, but there's this, it seems that the talent needs to have the character as well. Some of the things that you've described in this podcast: resilience, sense of communication, being very grounded about what will work and what doesn't, trusting your gut. I really picked that up. And when I went to school, there was a motto, do what you do well, which is the same as the drill one that finish the drill. It's the same thing. Like if you're going to do it, don't half-ass it, just do what you do well. So it's been really interesting talking to
you. Yeah, certainly. And just for those looking to break in, I just, it's the little simple things like you brought up communication. Even if you're a minor extra in a film, it takes you 5 minutes to send a well-written email to the director, the producer, the casting director to thank them for having you on the film, even if it's an uncredited extra role. And you know what? most people don't take the time to do that, so you never know, that could lead to a door opening for you in unexpected ways. So definitely never discount the value of communication.
What about just one other question? Are you doing anything in the acting world at the moment? Any film or anything?
We just finished filming Christmas on the Western Front. We filmed that here in Georgia. That's one that I wrote, executive produced, and directed. So that was very, very challenging and time consuming, especially with a pregnant wife. But we got it done, and we had a very talented cast, very talented co-director, very talented set designer who converted a cabin into a World War II cabin in the woods. I mean, it was incredible. What they did, the makeup, the design, I mean, everything about it was top notch. So, Christmas on the Western Front is in the editing room right now. I'll shoot it to you as soon as we have kind of that rough cut. And then we're working on one more that I just finished writing, and we're putting the shot list together. And I think we got the final actor signed yesterday. And that's called Napoleon's American, and it's an interesting historical piece based on what happened once the Louisiana Purchase was signed here in the U.S. Well, they had to get it to Europe, despite a British blockade and a bunch of other things going on at that time in the early 1800s in Europe. So it's a really cool period piece. Those are challenging because you have to get the costumes and everything has to be just right. So it's taken me a while to get all those pieces in place, but I just checked out the props on Monday and everything is looking fantastic. So that's another one that I've written that I'll be executive producing and then acting in. And then hopefully some more with you.
We've got some new scripts coming in, William, so we will collaborate again. And I'm one of those people, if I watch a film, especially a period piece, and the costumes are wrong, I disengage. I can't suspend my disbelief. I know that that's not what they would wear. That man would not have had that haircut. I know it's a bit pernickety, but I think if you've got that kind of eye, you will pick that up.
They are a blast to write, and they are a bear to bring to life. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, the period pieces. Yeah, so that's why we do ours in the modern times. William, where can people find you?
Yeah, so www.lanatequila.com, and then on social networks, we're at Lana Tequila, at LANATEQUILA. My books are JW Mcikula, MIKULA, books.com. And those would be some great ways to kind of see some of my content, my material. And thanks again for having me on today. It was great. It was a blast. I
had no idea you did that was your journey. So I'm really, really, really interested in how you got to where you did. It was amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Reb Chat. We really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining us. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with your friends. Until then, and until the next episode, keep well and goodbye for now.